topic. We want to address as many questions as possible and be fair to everyone on the call. So we do ask you keep your to one question at a time, and then we will mute everyone except the chief during the answer so that everyone can get clean sound. If you do have any follow-ups, you can let me know in the chat, and then I'll ask you to unmute to ask it. But again, there'll be limited time for that, so just fair warning on that. Acting Chief Davis does have a small window of time available today, so we're going to get to as many questions as we can within the time that we have. So with that, I'll step aside and introduce Portland Police Acting Chief Chris Davis.
Well, good morning, everyone. And I want to start by thanking all of you for your patience. I know that information about this started coming out last night, and this is the first time I've had to sit still, obviously, since about 6 o'clock this morning. And so I do appreciate everyone's patience. What I can tell you so far is that last night, all of the police officer, detective, and sergeant members of our rapid response team met, and as a result of that discussion, voted to, as a group, to offer their resignation from their assignment with the rapid response team. These people will all still be the Portland Police Bureau employees, but our rapid response team is a voluntary assignment within the Police Bureau. This represents approximately 50 people that we're talking about. And, as you know, the rapid response team, or, we call everything by its initials in the Police Bureau, the RRT, is responsible. It's an all hazards team. And so it's responsible for public order policing, which is most often what we use it for, but it's also trained and available for things like large scale searches, human-made and natural disaster response, and other large incidents requiring a highly trained and coordinated response for whatever the mission is. I want to just acknowledge how challenging these times are, how challenging they have been for really the last couple years since the beginning of the pandemic. Certainly all of just the national conversation and events in the wake of the murder of George Floyd and the tremendous amount of stress that has been placed on our entire organization, certainly the members of RRT, as a result of some really difficult times that they went through in over 150 nights of sustained civil unrest in the last year in this city. All that being said, as your police bureau, we are committed to providing the community the best service that we can. And this does not mean that there will be no response in public order situations. We'll use the resources that we have. Some of what I've been doing this morning is meeting with partners from other agencies and other folks in the policing community to make sure that we have a plan in place to protect the community no matter what happens within the resources that we have. So with that, I'm sure there are lots of questions. I'll try to get to as many of them as I can.
All right, so we'll move on to questions. I'll take them in order again. Nick Budnik has his hand up first. So Nick, go ahead and unmute.
Is it your intent to, well, can you go into more details about what your intent is to replace the members of RRT or replace its functions?
So the officers all still work here. And, one of the things that we have used in the past is mobile field forces from the precincts with on-duty resources. We're looking at our options as far as staffing a little bit heavier on different shifts throughout the weekend. And we're also still just in conversations with RRT because obviously they've raised a lot of concerns that we want to try to address as their employer. But we will be able to adapt and use on-duty resources as necessary.
Kelly Azar from K2, go ahead with your question.
Thank you for taking the time. My question is a little bit of a two-part. It's one question, but two parts. first and foremost, you mentioned a little bit that it's not that police officers won't be responding to any sort of demonstrations or riots. Can you go into a little bit more detail about how you plan to continue to respond and what that will look like? And if you could also explain the other duties that officers, part of the RRT, did, and are we lacking that specialty and technicality now if we do have those large scale searches or large scale need for that expertise?
In the long term, we will have to find some way to make sure that we have that capability that the public relies on. And then in the short term, we'll have to find a way to adapt and maintain as much of that capability as we can with the resources that we have. And we still have all the same employees, and we still have, you know, people in the organization with those skills. Really what this represents is, you know, they have offered to step away from that voluntary responsibility on that team. And so, you know, what you are likely to see is similar response, just using a little different approach with on-duty resources as opposed to the you know, the specialized folks coming in and kind of taking on that mission.
All right, Alexzielinski is up next.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned how RRT, you know, raised concerns with you and other management last night. Can you explain kind of what concerns were raised and your kind of response to those concerns, and if you agree that those are valid problems?
I can, and I guess I would answer that by just saying, you know, our entire organization, and not even just our sworn staff, but also our professional staff in the last 14 months, has been put through something none of us have ever seen in our careers, and at a level and an intensity that I don't think any other city in the United States has experienced. And so, you know, these are human beings, and they're committed professionals. I think it is a testament to the quality of people that we have here and the quality of training that we give them, that under some really, really extreme circumstances over the last 14 months, these men and women have continued to show up and try to serve the city every day. And so, you know, I think if you ask that much of anyone for that long, that takes a toll, and it takes a toll individually. And I think it really highlights the need for us to invest in the wellness of our employees. And there's a growing realization of the importance of employee and officer wellness in police organizations nationally. And so, you know, I think that this is something that we can move forward on. And I think, you know, it is certainly a difficult situation right now, but I think it is something that if we're thoughtful about it, and if we come together as a community around these men and women who've made some tremendous sacrifices over the last 14 months, we have the opportunity to make this organization once again the place where everybody wants to be. And so that's certainly what I'm going to devote my energy to as long as I'm here.
Okay, Audrey from KPTV is in line next. Go ahead, Audrey.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Just to be a little bit more specific on a couple of things that were already asked, if there's a riot, say tonight or tomorrow night, who exactly responds from the Bureau, and how is that coordinated?
So we will use on-duty patrol resources to respond to those. We will be, I have directed that we stand up an incident management team, at least for tonight. We will probably end up doing that throughout the weekend. Obviously, I don't want to give away all of our plans because that enables people to try to defeat them, but we will make sure that we have as close to adequate resources as we can get within just the limits that we have to deal with anything that comes up with on-duty resources. These events typically over the last 14 months have had impacts on call response times elsewhere in the city. That's one of the, that is one of the problems that this continued, especially the sort of pseudo-organized criminal activity that goes on. Those events have been a drain on resources all along. But again, all of these officers who are on RRT still work for the police bureau, and so we can still have them come in and function as police officers, including in one of those situations, as we need to direct them to do so. And no one on RRT is saying that they won't follow a lawful and policy authorized direction that they're given by the management of the police bureau.
Sorry.
Okay, Maxine Bernstein, go ahead, Max.
Fortunately. I'm really sorry. Just timing away.
Hi, thank you. I just have a couple of questions. One is this team is specially trained, and I know a federal judge in the past year ordered additional training for rapid response team officers. So if you're going to replace them with like mobile field force and patrol officers, how will you ensure that the training, that these officers get the training they need to do crowd control? That's my first question. And the larger question is, have you seen anything like this in your career, of any team that has voluntarily decided to resign from their duties? And do you believe the Bureau is in a crisis situation where the relationship between the Bureau, City Hall, and the DA's office has deteriorated to such a point that there needs to be another alternative?
There's a lot to unpack there, Max, and I may have to ask you to repeat some elements.
I will gladly do that. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I got that.
No,
in.
that's totally all right. I'll do the best that I can, and I think I'll go kind of in reverse order. As far as our relationship with our other partners in local government and in the criminal justice system, there, especially in times like this, there are always going to be friction points in those relationships. That's just normal. But one good thing that we do have in Portland and in Multnomah County is we have good relationships with those partners. And when things like this happen, we are able to sit down with one another and work through this kind of problem. And I do have confidence in the strength of our relationship with the district attorney, with the sheriff's office, with all of our local criminal justice and policing partners, that we'll be able to work through those friction points like we do all the time. When you're working with really, really smart people on really difficult issues, sometimes those friction points arise. But I don't expect that we'll see what some other cities have seen, where that relationship deteriorates and people aren't talking to each other. That's just, I don't see that happening here. And I think that can give the public some confidence, actually, that we are fortunate to have those relationships be as strong as they are. Have I ever seen anything like this in my career? No. I don't think any of us have. I had a conversation with one of my mentors in policing earlier on in all of this situation, who has seen and done everything that there is to do. And his comment to me even was, I have no idea how to give you much advice on the situation that you're in, because no one's ever been through it before. But as an organization, we are resilient. We learn from our mistakes. We work through problems. We confront issues, and we care about our people, and we listen to them when they raise concerns. And so I think as long as we are just straightforward and honest with one another about where the issues are, I think we will be able to work through them. This is an incredibly resilient organization. And I still believe that's why it has held up as long as it has under some really, really difficult circumstances. And no, we have not been perfect. I don't think any organization would. And yes, we will hold people accountable when they get out of line. We'll do that in an appropriate way. We have a commitment to be fair about it to all involved. But, all of those characteristics of this organization are what makes it, I think, resilient enough to get through this and a lot of other challenges that it faces. And so, having gone backwards, can you just briefly remind me of your first question?
Okay, well, I've changed it. So my question is, in October, from what I understand, having read this letter from the union president, he sent a letter to the chief and the mayor outlining the concerns of RRT. They alleged that they were being used as a political pawn, that the supervisors were not allowed the power to determine the team's police tactics, that politicians were instead controlling those decisions, and requested that any investigations of their team members be done in a timely manner. So I wondered what was done to address that, and can the Bureau also order these officers to work as a team again?
Well, in short, yes. I mean, we can give orders to our officers, and they have made it very clear to us that they will follow any lawful order that they are given. There's a way in our directives. If someone is ordered to do something that's unethical or that is against the law, then, you know, obviously we don't expect them to follow those orders. But there has never in all of this situation been any question about whether or not they'll do what we order them to do. Now, it's my responsibility to make sure that if we order someone to go out and do something, that I'm not subjecting them to any more risk than I absolutely have to. And that's why we have to be smart about how we send them out to do this work and what strategy we want them to follow to go do it. In regards to the letter in October, you know, I think what you see in there is their perspective from where they are. For timeliness of investigations, we make a lot of efforts to do investigations as quickly as possible, because just in general, for any kind of internal affairs, or certainly an internal criminal investigation, which is much more rare, the longer you drag that out, it's not like fine wine. It doesn't get better with age. And so you need to resolve those issues as quickly as you can. It has been challenging on that front because of just the sheer volume of work that everyone has to do right now. And then once any kind of criminal inquiry starts, then a lot of times that will slow down the internal review of whatever the incident was. But certainly, I mean, I think that concern for timely investigations when there are questions about a member's actions that's a reasonable concern, and it's one that we all share with them. You know, as far as any kind of politics are not really my business, and so I can't really speak to political issues surrounding the police bureau. My job is to make sure that I provide the safest environment with the clearest direction that I can for our members to go out and keep the community safe. And that's really where my focus is, rather than on political issues.
Thank you.
All right. I know that we're getting close to the end of your available time, Chief. How about a couple more questions? Going to Tess Risky now. Go ahead, Tess.
Hi, thank you. Chief Davis, I want to know, do you have any objection to District Attorney Mike Schmidt's office prosecuting PPB officers?
I have no objection to police officers being held accountable when they engage in criminal activity. Accountability is a cornerstone of our profession, and I don't think anyone among all of our police professionals objects to people being held accountable. Of course, it's always our expectation of ourselves within the organization when we hold employees accountable that we afford them the due processes that they have a right to under the law and the collective bargaining agreement if they're part of one. And we expect, and frankly, I would say I would expect the district attorney to act in good faith and fairly to address any criminal issues that come up among our members. And that's a long-standing expectation. And, you know, there are a lot of times where the police bureau will do an investigation and refer it to the district attorney's office for review to make sure that there aren't any criminal issues before we move forward with an administrative investigation. So, In short, my answer to your question is, of course, I expect the district attorney's office to perform its role in holding people accountable for criminal conduct, whether those people are Portland police officers or anyone else. And I think we all as professionals expect that, and we know that we're held to a very high standard.
All right, our last question will be Liz Birch. Go ahead, Liz.
Thank you so much for your time today. Deputy Chief, you touched on this, but I want to ask more specifically. In the resignation of those 50 officers from RRT, did they bring up the indictment of an officer this week and the DOJ investigation into a detective?
They brought up that among a lot of other things, yes. And I guess the way I would characterize this is, as I understand the situation, just having listened to people and really heard what they're saying, I think that really this is the culmination of a very long process, and it's not just an indictment that caused this to happen. I think this really has very deep roots in some really just, I don't even have the adjective for it, just really unbelievable things that they have been exposed to and subjected to over the last 14 months, particularly in the second half of 2020. And, I understand that those are very complex issues, but I also understand their perspective that, if you put a human being through what they were put through, that takes a toll. And when there is, and I have to honor their perspective in this situation and just understand where they're coming from, that they're not feeling like that sacrifice that they have made necessarily has been understood very well, and that's their perspective, and I have to honor their perspective. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't think it is just an indictment that caused this to happen. I think it is a very long, complicated history of things that have gone on over the last 14 months.
Okay, with that, we will call it. I just wanted to let everybody know, remind everybody, especially those who got on late, that since Chief Lavelle is out at training this week, Deputy Chief Davis, his title is acting chief for this week. So in your coverage, just be aware of that. And then I think you all have our email, but for those of you that had your hands raised, I apologize we didn't have time to get to you, but we will try to get you answers today to your questions. Just email us at ppbpio@portlandoregon.gov. With that, I will thank you very much, and we'll talk soon.